we will switch a little bit into another part. So having become a yoga teacher, you will also learn about the 8 limbs of yoga. Won't go into details, but the 3rd limb of yoga is the asanas, yes, the postures. Yeah. And there are thousands of them. So there's just so many you can have in your own repertoire. But I want to talk about the 4th limb of yoga called pranayama. Pranayama, literally translated, is breathing. There's sequences of breathing, and then there are so many types of pranayamas. So in my case, I've ended up choosing 4 of the ones that work well for me. And what do I mean by work well for me? It allows me to de-stress. It allows me to ensure that my entire breathing system, my respiratory system, is at its optimum performance. I'll come back to that one. Then be able to light the inner fire. Kapalabhati is a good one, where you really educate the core of the body to become alive. And then the Bhamari breath is one of my favorite ones, which is using the sound and using the vibrations to make sure the voice box works well, apart from the rest of the breathing system. So I choose 4: Nadi Sudhana, Ujjayi, Kapalabhati, and Bhamari. Are you familiar with those, Annalise?
You didn't explain the Nadi Sudhana. Would you like to give us a little explanation on that one, please?
I will. I'll go through all of them briefly. Nadi Sudhana is the alternate nostrils breathing. So as
it sounds complicated.
It sounds complicated, but let's just step back a little bit before I come to the Nadi Sudhana. We simply need to study, learn, and observe. We have 2 sections of our respiratory system: upper respiratory system and the lower respiratory system. Okay, what are we talking about? Above the clavicle, so through the air passage, through the nostrils, through a tube that goes in and into the ear canals, at the back of what's called the tympanic membrane, the eardrum, that the tubes, the nostrils, the air passage, right to the top of the clavicle is the upper respiratory system. Below that, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, and then into the lungs. And at the very base of the rib cage, we have the diaphragm that is almost shaped like a parachute that moves up and down. Okay, lower respiratory system, upper respiratory. What better do we need in this day and age, having had 2 years of this challenging virus that focused on our breathing system? It focused and succeeded in where the breathing system was weak or weaker.
Yeah. So why do you think that was? Why have we not had, why have we never been taught to breathe properly? There's lots of talk about these new types of breathing, but why would you have to have another type of breathing if you weren't used to?
That's it.
We all breathe, we're all alive, we're all breathing. So why introduce a new one?
Well, introduce a new one for a good enough reason. Yes, we do things like we buy a new jacket because that's the one that's going to keep us warmer, or whatever. Apart from the looks, it's going to keep us warmer. It's literally starting to think that way. If I get my respiratory system working at its optimum, it is like my shoulders. Yeah, respiratory system doesn't get frozen shoulders, but it gets frozen stages of rest. You see people who are breathing just in the upper chest. So the lower parts of the lungs are not being worked. Now, what's so important about that? Well, believe it or not, 80% of the capillaries live in the lower 2/3 of the lungs. What do I need capillaries for? Well, that is where the gas exchange takes place. That means you can get proper oxygen in. You can get rid of carbon dioxide. Yeah, these are the functions of it. Well, why do I need to worry about the eustachian tube? Well, they're such a narrow, and if they get infected, it affects the hearing, it affects the balance, it starts to block the noses. Whether you are prone to allergies of the pollen count, but we live in an environment which is quite high in pollution levels, parts per million of various kinds of things we shouldn't have. If I was ingesting those things and my body was not able to take care of it, then I would pay the price. So lots of examples of that. So Nadi Sudana, going back, left and right nostrils. These are the nadis. Nadis means channels. These are the main energy channels of taking energy, prana, the life force, into the body. Try it. Without eating, you'll live for about 20 days. Without water, you probably live for about 4 or 5 days. Without air, we're counting seconds and minutes. So this is the life force. If we then start to balance and practice with Nadi Sudana, we start to focus into the body. My left nostril breath in and out, my right nostril breath, whichever way you are used to being, you have been taught Nadi Sudana. Once I get both the nostrils working, the energetic balance in my brain, the left and right lobes of the brain come into balance, which means I am now in inner body meditation. Nadi Sudana not only helps me with the energetic balance in the brain, it helps the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the communication channel between the brain and every organ in the body, whether it's the kidney or adrenal glands, or it's your heart, or it's your spleen. So Nadi Sudana has enormous benefits. How long do I do it for? 10 to 15 minutes. In a class, it can be probably 3 or 4 rounds because people are getting used to it. But once they buy into the benefits of it, and that's the job of the yoga teacher, sell it.
Yeah.
This is why I'm doing it. And I'm only teaching you what I do it. And that way it's a good selling process. So that's that.
I've heard it's a really great one for sleeping as well, helping you sleep at night. It's
absolutely
been used quite a lot for that.
So this would be,
the mind's racing, getting that balance and calming down.
Yeah.
Exactly. Communicating to all the organs that it's time for sleep. It can relax. What a better way to do it.
And if you sleep well, then the body mends itself well, and the process continues.
Exactly.
It's a lovely, so lasting at night, 10 or 15 rounds, 5 minutes or maybe 7 minutes, alternate nostril breathing, taking your time, bringing the whole persona down to getting ready for sleep. It's not reducing temperatures. It is the inner work. You mentioned it. Had an argument at work and I'm still carrying it in my head. Well, now is an opportunity to get rid of it. That way you get good sleep, good sleep. So Nadi Sudana, enormous number of benefits. I'll move rapidly on to the next one, which is the Ujjayi. Remember, we spoke very briefly about people just breathing in the upper chest. That's not uncommon. You can see, especially if you're stressed out there.
That was me. Yeah.
Well, when you first
some
came,
days still, yeah, exactly. That before I knew about yoga or any different types of breathing, I had no idea that I wasn't quite using everything to its full capacity.
No. And that's really is something I would hesitate to guess, but I would give about 95% of the population doesn't breathe properly.
Yeah.
And that's the same amount of percentage.
I think it's probably higher.
But 95 is also rattled around as a percentage of people who don't get good sleep. So use pranayama.
I definitely think it has a domino effect.
It definitely does. It does. I mean, I will again sell I don't have any problem sleeping. you know, Carl, my wife says you can sleep on a string. Yes, but when I fall asleep, I go to sleep and my body is ready for it. My thought process is, however, less about me. We got into the next level. We talked about the upper chest. The other one is Ujjayi breath. Ujjayi, the word, Sanskrit word, it has two meanings. One, it's sometimes the breathing is referred to as the ocean breath. So there's the waves coming in and waves going out. So it's a deep breath in and a deep exhalation. Yeah. That would be Ujjayi, the ocean breath. We've modified, I've gone into the second meaning of it, which means flying up. Ujjayi means flying up. Well, what's flying up? It's the diaphragm.
What's flying up? Yeah.
It's the diaphragm that will fly up. And it will fly up because I'll use my belly muscles. That presses the diaphragm up, especially when my lungs are full. That's our kind of Ujjayi. So it's really opening up. 73 million alveoli in each lung. These are like little balloons, the red ones, the blue ones, the green ones, 73 million each lung. If they were slightly full and the diaphragm flew up, they would expand a bit more. I want that. Why? Because of the capillaries that do the gas exchanges. I want them to have more room to get rid of what I don't need and take up what I need more of. So my breathing slows down.
So just to double check, sorry, with the diaphragm, does that have to move to be able to get that expansion at the lower edge of the lungs, at the bottom of the lungs?
It does.
What's the diaphragm's purpose in that action?
Good, very. The diaphragm, when we breathe in, the diaphragm drops. So the lungs and the capacity of the lungs is being used. And the diaphragm is making room and the lower parts of the lungs are getting. So this is a normal breath in and out. Now that is what everybody does, whether they're asleep or they're running or they're walking, that is the process. Now, in my case, I want my alveoli, the little balloons that do the gas exchanges, I want them to expand as much as possible. That means they are stretching. They are, after all, a part of a muscle. They have their cellular structure. So when that balloon opens up a bit more, it has more gas in it. Oxygen goes into the bloodstream, carbon dioxide is removed. So flying up in our case of the diaphragm deliberately, physically, is to make sure that the lungs do that. Expand, even when they're full, we put a bit more pressure on it and expand them a bit more. And sometimes in that kind of Ujjayi, you will feel it in your tympanic membrane, in your eardrums. What does that tell you? The entire respiratory system is being worked. I want that. Whether the COVID-19 5.492 version is going to come or whatever is going to come, I want my respiratory system to be ready to combat. Is he going to win or not?
But it's not just the respiratory system, is it? It starts with the respiratory, with the system and the taking in of the air, but it is that exchange of the gases that then feeds the blood and makes sure that the blood is healthy for the rest of the body. So it's contributing to everything, and sleep and so many things, like you say.
Absolutely.
So why would you particularly do the ocean breath, even without the flying up? What's the point of the ocean? Yeah.
Well, that gets a little bit more towards the Nadi Sadhana. It's more calming. And it also is a meditation. Is
it just give rhythm to?
And it gives rhythm, but it's also a meditative.
So you're going with the rhythm.
You hear the sound of the ocean through your breathing, you know. So where are you?
How do you make that sound?
It is through the throat. So it's literally when you constrict the throat, you make that sound. Yeah. And it's that breathing. It's And you can almost hear it, and you can mostly hear it internally. Somebody outside may be able to hear it. So the ocean breath is Ujjayi. Our Ujjayi version that I do and I teach is the flying up version, simply expanding the system a bit more. And I do both. Time to time, I go to a class where the teacher is teaching the ocean breath. Wonderful. I'm all for it. Yes. Okay. So that's the second. We did Nadi Sadhana, the alternate nostrils breathing, and it affects the vagus nerve and meditation. Then the Ujjayi in two parts, ocean breath and the flying up of the diaphragm, expanding the alveoli. We continue towards more, let's say, a little bit more aggressive, if you like. And I like the idea of making use of my body to maximize my respiratory system. So we move to the next one, which is Kapalabhati, the bellows breath. That's like, if you can visualize, is you are trying to light a fire. So it is, except it's not coming through the mouth, it's coming through the nostrils. So it is lighting the inner fire, using the belly muscles. When I use belly muscles, it's stirring up my digestive system, my liver, my gallbladder, my spleen, my heart, everything is working and shaking away.
And I know that particularly the emotions get stirred up with this one as well, and it can expel the energy of an emotion that's hanging around and needs to be released.
And that, when you do a good Kapalabhati session, every teacher will be taught as we go along. Don't be surprised if one or two in the corner are just looking for tissues to wipe off their tears. And it leads to what you said. Where do we hold our emotions? It's in the hara region, in the belly area. You stir it up, well, get rid of what you don't need. So cry it out. It's a good.
Let it go.
Let the tears go, cleans the eyes nicely, and it's so and so and so forth. But get rid of the emotion.
And laughter. It can bring about some laughter as well, which is a good way to get rid of the emotions as well.
That's the other bit, is giggling.
It's not all tears.
No, giggling is not uncommon. When you're sitting there doing Kapalabhati, there's somebody in the corner there who's giggling away because it's releasing a lot of emotions. And
actually I found when I've done it as well, because it is such a physical breath, it does make me feel quite happy and joyful. So then I will just laugh as a response to that. It's not even just what's going on. It's just such a lovely practice to do in a group of people. You can see the energy.
As a group, all of a sudden the group becomes more magnetic. People give each other hugs.
Now I'm smiling just thinking about, I'm thinking about doing it. Yeah.
Well, I'm very reluctant to go and hug somebody who is in a terrible place. I'm more than happy to hug somebody who's open to being hugged. But yeah, Kapalabhati is slightly more aggressive, but highly beneficial. I mean, I've just dealt with one or two. The emotional side is a lot deeper, because that really takes care of also the back issues, because most of us store our bed experiences behind us, so leaving them behind. Kapalabhati helps into that one. The fourth one I work with is, for myself as well, is the Bhamari breath, making the sound of the bee, Bhamari.
This is my favorite.
It's one of mine too. So after the Nadi Sadhana, Ujjayi, Kapalabhati, I come across, and it happens to me as well. I mean, what is it in the throat that gets stuck? Sometimes it is simply part of the emotion. How many of us are not able to say what we wanted to say? That's stuck in there. I want to make sure that I allow the vibrations of the sound to cleanse the voice box. and also the nostrils and the tympanic membrane right up to and the eustachian tubes. So it is literally making the sound of the bee. So you fill up to the very top and go. Mm. Now some will go as a huge bumblebee, or some will go as a tiny little. Doesn't matter. The volume is not the critical point. It's the length of the breath, and everybody is different. So you go from the top, right to the bottom. So the entire lung system has been used, and the voice box is now a little bit clearer. That doesn't mean I'm going to start swearing and all that. No. There are things that are stuck in there in our daily life, especially if you are at work. So we started this thing with why become a yoga teacher. This is one of the things. How many times you wanted to say something to your boss and you weren't able to, because that would be P45 in our case, or a check. Yeah. So Nadi Sudhana, Ujjayi, Kapalabhati, Bhamari. Bhamari being my favorite, using the sound, cleansing, energizing the upper respiratory system, and a controlled vibration. The vibrations are in my control. I can make them loud, I can make them small, I can keep them going for 5 minutes, I can do them for 30 seconds. It's all in my control. Now that is worth having in your daily practice, if you like.
Absolutely. And also for me, becoming a yoga teacher, and actually, as you know, I didn't want to become a yoga teacher to start with. I didn't have the confidence in myself. I had no idea that I could be a teacher. I'm quite quietly spoken. So the confidence from the Bhamari breath, especially for me, and being able to make noise and be loud, really played a part in that process, and finding the confidence in being seen, being heard, and all of the emotions that go with that, and then help to free up some of those restrictions that I put on myself, or that I just hadn't really thought about. But really all of that kind of played a part to then becoming a teacher. And now, you know, I would never look back. I couldn't imagine my life without teaching one thing or another. Brilliant. From yoga, and then all the other subjects that come to fruition when you dip your toe in yoga. You realize that there's such a huge world, and you can branch in so many different directions. And again, for me, that has been such an amazing part of the journey, that I know that there's no competition out there, because everybody's different. Every yoga teacher is different. I teach differently to the way you do. We have hundreds of students that come through the school, and not one of them has been the same, or teaching in the same way, the same style. We give them all the right precautions, and using the right language, and teach them how to teach, but it comes from them, from within themselves.
As part of the teacher training force at the school, yeah, we've discussed this several times. We keep our syllabus, we could expand it to a huge amount, but we try and keep it to what I call the foundation. So once you have our 250 hours as a foundation, you mentioned you can grow, do pregnancy yoga, yin yoga, ashtanga yoga, whatever you want to do, vini yoga, but if you have a good solid foundation, I'm a yoga teacher, I make a good living from it, I'm the frontline services of my health service, I know why I need to do 4 different types of pranayama in my classes, because everybody can do them as well. What is it that I'm doing? Once you've arrived at that from a school, in our case, that's when we let them go after the 10th weekend. You're done. Now go and do it. And you're right, there are tens and tens of our teachers. None of them are the same as the other. None of them. They all have their own personality, their own style of teaching yoga.